The Galactic Council Hall was quiet when the message from Earth arrived. A single blue light blinked on the table, meaning the message had a high-risk tag. But no one stood up. No one looked worried. Most council members already believed humans were dramatic, emotional beings who liked to exaggerate danger. So when the message began to play, many of them were already smiling. The recording showed an old human scientist standing in a dark room. His face looked tired, and his voice was slow but serious. He said that something was moving outside the galaxy. Something large. Something not natural. He explained that Earth had detected strange energy waves, unlike anything known before. He warned that planets near the outer rim could fall without making a single sound. He ended by saying that humanity would defend itself, even if no one else helped. The council laughed before the message even finished. They joked that humans watched too many war dramas. They said humans worried too much. Some aliens even said humans liked to pretend they were heroes. A few members voted to delete the message immediately. And that was exactly what they did. The warning from Earth disappeared in seconds, and the room returned to normal business like nothing had happened. On Earth, things were not normal. Every major human city had gone into silent mode. Streets that were usually full of noise were now empty. Military bases had locked down. The sky above Earth had grown strangely quiet, as if nature itself was waiting for something. Scientists continued to watch the strange energy waves moving closer. Many of them stayed awake for days, trying to understand the pattern. But all the numbers, all the signals, told the same story. Something big was coming. Something not friendly. Deep under the planet, far below the oceans and mountains, humans worked on a secret project known only by a few leaders. It was called Project Iron Heart. Even most soldiers did not know what it really was. Only a small group of commanders understood the full purpose. They believed that one day humanity would face something too powerful for normal weapons. They had prepared for that day quietly, without telling the galaxy. Now, that day was almost here. Far from Earth, in dark space where no ship normally traveled, a silent flash appeared. It was bright for only a second, then it vanished. The flash opened a small crack in space, like someone cutting through a black curtain. Through that crack, something began to move. It was not a ship. It was not alive in a normal way. It looked like a massive shadow made of shifting metal and smoke. No signals came from it. No energy that ships could detect. It moved without sound or light, as if the universe itself feared to touch it. On a small human observation station near the outer rim, 3 scientists saw it first. They watched as the shadow grew bigger on their screens. At first, they thought it was a glitch. But the shape kept growing and growing until it filled most of the screen. One of them tried to send a message to Earth, but the signal failed. Another tried to activate the station's defense system, but the system only made a soft crackling noise and shut down. The shadow stopped right in front of them. Then the screen turned completely black. In the next seconds, all communication with the observation station ended. It was as if the station had never existed. Earth received no distress call. No warning. Only silence. Inside a hidden command center deep under the Atlantic Ocean, human leaders watched the incoming data. They saw the moment when the station vanished. A single red alarm flashed across the entire wall. Everyone in the room understood what it meant. The enemy had arrived. The chief commander, an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, stood up slowly. She had been preparing for this moment her whole life. She knew the Galactic Council would not help. She knew humanity stood alone, just like the scientist in the first message had warned. She looked at the officers and gave a single order. Activate Iron Heart. Soldiers across hidden bases received the command. Metal gates that had been locked for decades opened for the first time. Massive engines roared to life. The ground shook as giant underground hangars lifted toward the surface. New human warships, built in secret, rose from the oceans like steel giants. Their hulls shined with dark armor no alien race had ever seen before. Far away in the galaxy, the Council still had no idea what had happened. They believed Earth was safe. They believed the warning had been a joke. They continued their meetings, unaware that the darkness now moving toward them had already crushed its first human outpost. But Earth knew. Earth had always known. And now, humanity was preparing for a war they tried to prevent but were forced to fight alone. The shadow in space continued to expand, reaching for the next target. And humanity, after being ignored and mocked, was ready to answer with something the galaxy had never seen before. They were ready to fight without mercy. The void in space moved closer to the next human outpost, a small colony orbiting a frozen planet at the edge of the galaxy. The colony had been peaceful, almost forgotten by the rest of the universe. Its people believed that nothing dangerous could ever reach them. They were wrong. Without warning, the shadow struck. A wave of energy passed through the colony, cutting communications and power in an instant. Lights went out. The surface trembled. Machines exploded as the strange force moved over everything. People ran, but the shadow was faster. Buildings crumbled like sandcastles under a storm. There was no fire, no sound, only the invisible pressure that crushed everything in its path. Back on Earth, the observation teams watched in silence. The screen showed shapes collapsing, people running, and the colony disappearing in seconds. No human life could be saved at that distance without risking immediate confrontation. The Council would have still ignored it if they could have seen. But humanity did not wait for help. Humanity was already planning its counterattack. Deep within the Earth's secret command center, the chief commander studied the incoming footage. Her eyes were calm, but her mind raced. She touched a small holographic display, and tiny drones flew across the war room, each one capable of scanning and analyzing enemy movements faster than any human mind. "They are fast, but they are not prepared for humans," she said softly. Her words were full of confidence and warning at the same time. Soldiers moved with precise efficiency, checking weapons, boarding massive ships, and preparing for launch. The Iron Heart fleet was enormous, larger than any alien species had ever imagined Earth could produce. Each ship was armed with energy weapons, shielded with new technology, and built for survival against the most powerful enemies. But what mattered most was not the size of the ships, it was the humans themselves. Soldiers had been trained for years, conditioned to think as a unit, to strike with precision, and to fight without fear. Meanwhile, the shadow had begun to split, sending smaller, faster fragments across nearby systems. They attacked mining stations and colonies indiscriminately. Some fragments moved so fast that sensors could not track them. Entire worlds lost power, communications, and life in moments. Alien species began to panic, realizing that the humans who had warned them might have been telling the truth all along. But humanity's strike was ready. The fleet launched in unison, rising from the oceans, from underground bases, and even from hidden asteroids. For the first time, the universe saw humans as more than fragile beings. They were warriors, thinkers, and survivors in one. The fleet moved in perfect coordination, surrounding the shadows that had already destroyed the colony. Every ship fired in precise sequences, targeting weak points that humans had predicted through careful study. The shadow reacted with confusion, as if it had never faced resistance before. It moved wildly, striking at ships that were already dodging and countering. Humans did not panic. They adapted. They learned every movement, predicting the shadow's next strike before it even happened. Drones analyzed the energy patterns and fed data back to the fleet's main computer, adjusting attacks instantly. Inside the command center, the chief commander watched as screens showed fragments of the shadow being destroyed. She did not smile. She knew this was only the beginning. More shadows would arrive. More planets would be at risk. But humanity had something no alien species had: determination. They would not stop. They would not retreat. They would fight alone if they had to, and they would win. The battle stretched across space like a storm. Flashes of energy lit the darkness. Ships moved with precision and power. Shadows fell apart piece by piece, and humans adapted faster than anything in the galaxy had seen. The first real strike was successful, but the war was far from over. Yet in that moment, Earth had proven one thing. Even if ignored, even if mocked, humanity would fight. And when humans fought, the galaxy had better watch carefully. The screens went dark for a moment, showing the calm surface of Earth. Cities were still alive, people were still working, and underground bases were preparing the next wave. The chief commander touched the screen, her fingers tracing the image of the destroyed colony. "They will remember this," she said. "They will all remember what happens when humans fight for survival." And in the dark space beyond, the shadows were regrouping. They did not know what awaited them. They had underestimated humans. They had ignored the warnings. And that mistake, as humanity would soon show, would cost the galaxy more than anyone could imagine. The remnants of the shadow fled deeper into space, retreating toward unknown regions of the galaxy. But humans did not chase blindly. Instead, they studied every movement, every energy signature, and every fragment left behind. The Ironheart fleet adjusted its tactics, learning as fast as the enemy changed. It was as if humans were evolving mid-battle, faster than anything else in the galaxy could comprehend. On Earth, scientists monitored the battle in real time. Holographic screens displayed the chaos of space warfare, with ships dodging and firing, shadows disintegrating under precise human strikes, and fragments of unknown matter drifting like smoke in zero gravity. Children in schools watched on special broadcasts, not for fear, but for understanding. Humanity was showing the galaxy that it was ready for anything, and everyone on Earth felt the weight of that responsibility. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council began to notice something unusual. Their messages to Earth were no longer being ignored, they were being answered with reports of total destruction of the shadows in specific sectors. Some alien worlds began sending panic signals, begging for help. But humanity had learned patience and strategy. The chief commander did not rush to respond. "We will help when it serves humanity," she said. Not before. Deep in the fleet, human pilots prepared for the next strike. They were trained for precision attacks in zero gravity, able to maneuver faster than anything the shadows could track. Weapon systems that had never been tested in real combat were now proving their worth. Plasma cannons, energy disruptors, and kinetic shields worked in perfect harmony. Every strike was calculated, and every movement was coordinated. A small team of special human agents was deployed to the nearest shadow cluster. These agents were not ordinary soldiers, they were engineers, tacticians, and warriors, all trained to act with lethal precision. Their mission was simple: disable the shadow core. The core was the central control of the enemy, and if it could be destroyed, the shadow's spread could be stopped. They approached in silence. Their ship's stealth systems masked their presence from the shadow's sensors. Inside, the team communicated only in gestures, each movement pre-planned and rehearsed hundreds of times. The moment they reached the shadow core, they unleashed a series of calculated explosions and energy pulses. The core shuddered, sparks flew, and the shadow fragments began collapsing in on themselves. Back on Earth, the chief commander watched the operation unfold on multiple screens. She knew the risk. One mistake, and the entire fleet could have been destroyed. Yet the humans executed the plan flawlessly. When the core finally exploded, it sent ripples through the surrounding shadows, breaking them into small, harmless fragments. The fleet moved in to clean up the remaining pieces. The first major victory was a turning point. Humans had proven not only that they could fight, but that they could win against an unknown enemy. Alien species across the galaxy began whispering about Earth in fear and respect. The species that had mocked humans were now reconsidering their assumptions. Perhaps humanity was not just a weak, primitive race after all. Even as the victory spread across the galaxy, Earth did not celebrate. There was no joy, no parades. Humanity had lost people, resources, and time. The chief commander reminded her officers that the battle was far from over. More shadows were out there, and the galaxy remained dangerous. But the lesson had been sent: humans would not wait to be attacked. They would strike first, and they would strike without mercy. In the weeks that followed, Earth's fleets continued their precise campaigns. Every encounter with shadow fragments strengthened their tactics. Soldiers grew more confident. Engineers refined their weapons. And the Galactic Council could only watch in fear as humanity's legend spread across star systems. Humans had gone from being ignored and laughed at to becoming the galaxy's new standard of power. Every enemy now understood a simple truth. When humanity fights, it fights without hesitation, without mercy, and without fear. And the shadows, whatever they were, had learned that their arrival in the galaxy would not go unanswered. Deep in space, as fragments of the destroyed shadow drifted aimlessly, a quiet message traveled toward the distant Galactic Council. It was short and simple. Earth warned you. We did not. The council members paled. They realized their mistake too late. Humanity had prepared, and now, no one could stop them. Earth's people, however, were ready for the next challenge. The fleet returned to hidden bases, repaired and upgraded. Scientists calculated the next wave of shadows. Soldiers trained for faster and smarter attacks. And above all, the chief commander reminded everyone of the same rule: humanity survives. Humanity fights. Humanity never gives up. And somewhere in the dark reaches of the galaxy, the shadows were regrouping. They had underestimated humans. They had ignored the warnings. And for that mistake, the galaxy was about to pay a heavy price. Humanity's war had just begun, but the message was clear: never ignore Earth again. The shadows' fragments scattered across several star systems, but the humans were ready. Each strike the enemy attempted was met with careful planning, precise timing, and a level of coordination that no alien fleet had ever seen. Even the fastest fragments could not escape the relentless pursuit of the Iron Heart fleet. Human ships glided through space with almost unnatural speed, cutting through the darkness like silver blades. On a remote planet, a colony that had believed itself safe watched the sky in horror. Massive shadow fragments swooped down, flattening structures and cutting communications. Panic spread like wildfire. But then, from the clouds above, human ships emerged. Their weapons fired in perfect bursts, each shot targeting the weak points the shadows didn't know they had. Entire fragments disintegrated before they could reach the surface. Civilians watched in awe, realizing that Earth had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone imagined. The Galactic Council tried to intervene. They sent fleets toward the battle, but they were too slow, too unprepared, and too cautious. Every attack they attempted was deflected or destroyed. The humans did not wait for the Council's approval. Humanity had learned that speed, precision, and determination were stronger than politics and hesitation. Inside the human command center, the chief commander studied the incoming reports. Her face was calm, but her mind calculated every possible threat. The next step had to be decisive. They would not just defend, they would strike. The target was the Shadow's main cluster, the point from which all fragments originated. Destroy it, and the rest would collapse. Delay, and the enemy could regroup. Special human teams were sent ahead in stealth ships. They moved silently, using the void of space as cover. Their mission was dangerous. They had to enter the core of the Shadow's cluster and plant energy disruptors capable of destabilizing the enemy. Each agent knew that if they failed, millions of lives could be lost. Yet, courage was their shield. They moved as one, a perfect combination of skill, instinct, and discipline. The operation began. Ships entered the cluster, dodging swarms of smaller shadows that attacked without pause. Explosions lit the void as human weapons cut through enemy armor. The disruptors were activated one by one. The shadow core shuddered, releasing a wave of energy that threatened the human fleet. But the humans had prepared for this. Shields absorbed the impact, and countermeasures protected the ships. The core finally exploded, sending fragments flying in all directions. The shadows were no longer coordinated. Pieces collided with each other, breaking apart. The humans pressed forward, cleaning up the remaining fragments with relentless precision. The first real offensive strike had succeeded, and humanity's power was on full display. Across the galaxy, alien species watched in shock. Worlds that had mocked Earth now sent messages begging for help. The council scrambled, realizing too late that ignoring humanity had been a mistake. But the humans did not answer pleas for aid. They had their own agenda. Only after the threat was fully neutralized would the humans consider who deserved their help. On Earth, there were no celebrations. The victory was a reminder that more challenges awaited. Scientists continued to monitor the galaxy, looking for the next wave of shadows. Engineers upgraded ships and weapons. Soldiers trained harder, preparing for battles that could arrive without warning. Humanity had learned to fight not just for survival, but for domination when necessary. The Galactic Council had no choice but to acknowledge Earth's power. Humans had gone from being a minor, ignored race to a force capable of reshaping the balance of the galaxy. The lessons were clear: underestimate humans at your own risk, and never ignore their warnings. In the dark reaches of space, where shadows had once moved freely, silence now reigned. Fragments drifted aimlessly, broken and powerless. But the humans were already preparing for the next challenge. They would not wait. They would not hesitate. And the galaxy, for the first time, truly understood what it meant to face humanity unleashed. And somewhere, deep in the void, the remnants of the shadows whispered through the empty darkness. They had seen humans fight and survive. They had underestimated them once, and they would never make that mistake again. But the galaxy had already learned the hardest lesson: when humans fight without mercy, nothing, not even the darkness of space itself, can stand in their way. Humanity's victory over the shadow fragments had sent ripples across the galaxy. Worlds that had ignored Earth's warnings were now trembling with fear. Messages came in from distant systems, begging for help, pleading for mercy. The Galactic Council, once arrogant and dismissive, convened emergency meetings, but their fleets were insufficient. They were slow, fragmented, and afraid. Humanity had become the new standard of power, and no one wanted to challenge them openly. On Earth, the chief commander studied the reports coming in from the fleets and special strike teams. Every fragment destroyed, every shadow core destabilized, was a mark of human precision and determination. "They will remember this," she said quietly. "Every species, every world, they will remember what happens when humans fight." Her officers nodded, understanding that mercy was not part of this message. Humanity had been mocked for centuries. Now, they would show the galaxy the cost of that arrogance. The next offensive was planned carefully. The human fleets moved not just to defend, but to strike at the heart of the Shadow's territory. Every fleet commander knew the risks. Every pilot, soldier, and engineer had trained for this moment their whole life. They were prepared for losses, but they would not retreat. Humanity had learned that fear was a tool to be used against their enemies, not a reason to stop. As the fleets advanced, communication channels across enemy territory were flooded with a single repeating message: "Earth warned you. Humanity fights alone." It was short, but its meaning was unmistakable. Entire systems froze, unsure whether to flee or fight. Some species attempted resistance, but their defenses were weak compared to the humans' advanced tactics and technology. One by one, enemy colonies fell, not because of overwhelming force alone, but because of the calculated precision and ruthless efficiency of human strategy. A squadron of elite human agents infiltrated a critical enemy world. Their mission was to destroy the remaining shadow cores that coordinated attacks across multiple star systems. Using stealth ships and advanced cloaking technology, they moved undetected, planting energy disruptors at strategic points. Explosions rippled across the planet's surface, severing the enemy's network of control. The shadows that had terrorized countless worlds began collapsing on themselves, like towers of cards under a sudden storm. The Galactic Council watched helplessly. Their fleets, once symbols of authority, were irrelevant against humanity's coordinated strikes. Members of the Council sent desperate messages, begging for guidance and intervention. But Earth did not respond. Humanity was no longer interested in alliances or favors. They had been ignored, laughed at, and dismissed. Now, the humans were writing the rules of survival, and the galaxy had no choice but to watch. The chief commander ordered the fleets to push further into the remaining shadow-infested territories. Each strike was decisive. The human soldiers fought with a combination of skill, ingenuity, and relentless courage that no other species had ever seen. Ships moved like living organisms, adapting mid-battle to threats the enemy didn't even know existed. Fragments of shadows were destroyed, captured, or turned against their own kind. Humanity's counterattack was complete, and the galaxy began to tremble at the name of Earth. Even after victories, humanity did not slow down. Engineers refined weapons and shields. Pilots practiced maneuvers that pushed ships beyond known limits. Scientists analyzed every fragment of enemy data to prepare for what might come next. Humanity was not content with survival alone, they were determined to dominate strategically, ensuring that nothing could threaten them again. In distant star systems, survivors of the shadow attacks whispered about humans in fear and awe. Alien species that had once mocked Earth now avoided its fleets. The lesson was clear: underestimate humans at your own risk. The species that had once thought Earth was insignificant now realized it was a force that could not be ignored, negotiated with, or defeated easily. Back on Earth, life continued quietly under the surface. Civilian life went on, soldiers prepared for future missions, and the fleets repaired and upgraded for the next inevitable threat. Humanity had proven one fundamental truth: when humans fight, they fight with relentless precision, without hesitation, and without mercy. And in the far reaches of space, the remaining shadows gathered, uncertain and frightened. They had underestimated humans, and they would never make the same mistake again. But the galaxy had already learned something harder. Earth had been ignored once, and now it had become unstoppable. Humanity was no longer just a planet, it was a warning. The message was clear to all: the galaxy ignored Earth's warning, and now humanity was fighting without mercy. No one would forget it. The remnants of the shadows fled deeper into uncharted space, but humanity was not finished. The Iron Heart fleet had grown stronger with every battle. Ships had been repaired, upgraded, and equipped with experimental weapons. Soldiers had trained relentlessly, mastering maneuvers and tactics that no alien species had ever seen before. The humans were no longer merely defending, they were on the offensive, hunting the enemy across the stars. The chief commander stood in the command center, her eyes scanning hundreds of holographic displays. Each screen showed a different part of the galaxy: systems under attack, fleets in motion, shadows scattering. "We strike at the core," she said firmly. "We will cut off their command and control. This war ends on our terms, not theirs." Her officers nodded, knowing the risk. The core was heavily protected, located in a system no human ship had ever visited. But they had no choice. Victory depended on precision, speed, and courage. Special human strike teams were deployed first. Their ships were small, fast, and nearly invisible. They carried advanced disruptors, devices capable of destabilizing the Shadow Core's energy. As they approached the system, the darkness seemed to thicken, moving as if alive. Shadows of enormous size swirled around the planets, guarding the core. But humans were prepared. Every maneuver, every strike had been calculated in simulations, tested thousands of times. They moved like ghosts, unseen until it was too late. Once inside the system, the fleets joined the strike. Human ships moved in perfect formation, striking in waves. Energy blasts tore through the shadows, splitting them apart. Smaller fragments attempted to flee, but intercept teams cut them off, leaving no escape. The shadows, once coordinated and terrifying, now flinched before the human advance. The special teams reached the core. It pulsed with dark energy, a swirling mass of power that controlled the remaining shadows. The agents deployed disruptors, carefully placing each one at a critical point. Sparks flew as the devices activated, and the core began to destabilize. A massive wave of energy erupted outward, sending fragments of shadows flying in all directions. Ships in the fleet adjusted instantly, protecting themselves while maximizing the impact of the blast. The core finally imploded, and the shadows collapsed in disarray. Entire systems that had been terrorized were now free, their skies no longer dominated by the dark forms. Humanity had struck decisively, proving not just that they could fight, but that they could end the enemy's command in one precise strike. The Galactic Council watched helplessly as the reports poured in. Their fleets had been useless, their warnings ignored. Alien worlds sent messages begging for protection, but Earth did not respond. The chief commander reminded her officers that humanity would act only in its own interest. Mercy was no longer a priority. Survival, dominance, and preparation were. Humanity's success sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Species that had once ridiculed Earth now trembled in fear. Tales of the Iron Heart Fleet and the humans' precision strikes spread from system to system. Even the Shadow's remaining fragments hesitated, knowing that resistance would be futile. On Earth, preparations continued. Scientists studied the Shadow's remnants, engineers developed new technology, and soldiers trained for the next challenge. Humanity had proven that it could survive alone, fight alone, and win alone. Yet they were not complacent. They knew that the galaxy was vast, threats were endless, and survival required constant vigilance. The chief commander gazed at the stars, her expression calm but resolute. Humanity had struck the first decisive blow, but the war was far from over. More shadows might emerge, more threats might rise. But one truth was clear: humans were unstoppable when they fought together, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. And somewhere, beyond the reach of sensors and fleets, the Shadow's remnants lingered, regrouping in fear. They had underestimated humanity once. They would never make that mistake again. But humanity had already learned everything it needed to know. In this war, hesitation was death, and mercy was a choice humanity no longer had to make. The Iron Heart Fleet prepared for the next wave, ready to strike before the enemy could act. Humanity had become the new law of the galaxy, relentless, precise, and unstoppable. And the message was clear: never challenge Earth. Never ignore its warnings. And never doubt humanity's will to fight without mercy. The galaxy was silent for a moment, as if it were holding its breath. The Shadow's remnants had scattered, their command destroyed, their forces broken. Worlds that had once feared them now began to rebuild, cautiously stepping back into life. But the humans did not pause. The Iron Heart Fleet moved like a storm through the dark reaches of space, cleaning up the last fragments, securing systems, and ensuring that no threat could rise again. The Galactic Council had no choice but to act. They sent envoys to Earth, carrying apologies, requests for guidance, and offers of allegiance. But humanity did not rush to answer. The chief commander studied the messages carefully. She knew that the Council had ignored Earth's warnings for centuries. Now, they were forced to acknowledge humanity's power, and that came with consequences. In a grand display of strategy and might, the human fleet approached the Council's capital system. It was the first time humans had entered the heart of the galaxy openly, and every species watched. Ships that had once been laughed at now moved with confidence and authority. Their formations were precise, their weapons ready, their presence undeniable. Humanity had become more than a planet. It had become a force that the galaxy could not ignore. When the humans landed, silence fell over the council chambers. Delegates who had once mocked and dismissed Earth now trembled at their presence. The chief commander did not speak of revenge or anger. She simply stated, "We warned you. You ignored us. Humanity fights without mercy, and now we decide who survives." The room shivered with the weight of her words. The galaxy had learned a lesson in humility that it would never forget. Meanwhile, human fleets returned to the outer systems, securing planets and colonies, ensuring that the Shadow's remnants could never reorganize. Soldiers patrolled the stars with vigilance, scientists monitored space for unknown anomalies, and engineers continued improving the fleet. Humanity had not just won a war, they had created a legacy. The galaxy would now measure power not by numbers alone, but by courage, preparation, and unyielding determination. The Shadows, wherever they hid, had learned the cost of underestimating humans. They would not return easily, and if they did, they would face a species that had fought and conquered beyond imagination. Every fragment destroyed, every strike planned and executed with precision, had proven that humanity's will was stronger than fear itself. Back on Earth, life resumed with a mix of normalcy and vigilance. People celebrated quietly, knowing that the galaxy now watched and respected them. Scientists continued to innovate, soldiers continued to train, and the chief commander continued to plan, knowing that peace was temporary, and survival required constant readiness. Humanity had become both shield and sword for the galaxy, a force that could protect itself and strike decisively when needed. In the deep void of space, silence reigned. The shadow's influence had been broken, and alien worlds were free to rebuild. But the galaxy had changed forever. Humans were no longer weak, easily dismissed, or ignored. They were a reckoning, a storm, a power that demanded respect. The final message traveled quietly through the stars, reaching every corner of the galaxy. Earth warned you. You ignored us. Now humanity fights, and the universe will never forget. And so, humanity stood alone, victorious, feared, and respected. The war had ended, but the legend of Earth had only begun. The galaxy had learned the hardest truth of all: when humans fight without mercy, nothing, not even the darkness of space, can survive their resolve. The stars themselves seemed to shine differently now, as if bearing witness to a species that had risen beyond expectation. Humanity had not just survived, they had become a warning, a symbol, and a force that would echo across the galaxy for all time. The universe would never forget Earth.